and it's entitled Forklift Operation and Pedestrian Safety. And you know, just to clarify right from the start, why would you link the two of them? The reason being is that in the regulations these days, that's exactly what they're looking for. Okay, so they're, you know, it used to be just forklifts, and pedestrian safety was something that was not looked at. And in the terms of the regulatory behavior that's going on across Canada, the two of them are intrinsically linked together. So that's why we're talking them, the two of them together. So just an introduction. The CWPCA Virtual Safety Group has been set up to help members in building resilient safety programs, to help them meet their regulatory requirements across Canada, and provide tools that they can then customize and use in their own facilities. I also wanted to remind everybody of your legal requirements. So right across Canada, employers have a legal responsibility to do three things. Well, three primary things that are relevant to today's conversation. Number one, you need to provide training. You need to provide notice to your employees of potential hazards in the workplace, and the training that you provide has to be specific to the workplace. And that's a lead into the next topic, which is the matter of what we call general training and workplace-specific training. So if you remember, the last module was about nail guns, and nail guns is specific to our industry, so we can talk about workplace-specific training. Forklifts, however, quite a bit different type of training. The general training is typically done by your forklift supplier or an outside contractor, and it's an introduction to general and basic operation of a forklift. So let's say you have Mitsubishi or you have Toyotas on site, then your staff are trained to those specific forklifts. Workplace specific training, though, is something that's entirely different. In that situation, what you need to do then as an employer is make sure that the people driving your forklifts inside your yard and plant have training geared to how to do the work inside those facilities. So what you'll see today is an example of both general training and workplace-specific training. Once again, just to review, this is a safe work procedure as opposed to some of the other documents you might see. This is a general document, and you will see in the next two modules something that's a little bit different. Certainly around lockout, tagout, it would be a different type of procedure because it's very, very specific on the steps that you have to do. This is a safe work practice as opposed to a safe work procedure. The two types of trucks that we're going to be talking about are a 5,000-pound propane truck and a diesel fuel truck 10,000 pounds and up. And the reason we've selected these two trucks is these are the dominant type of trucks in our industry based on my experience. There are numerous other types of forklifts out there. There's electric, there's counterbalance, there's reach, there's those type of vehicles. We're not talking about those today because in general they're not used in our industry. And at the end we'll show you where to find these specific procedures on the website and how to use them in your facility. So the next slide talks about competent people. and this is always a major challenge when delivering forklift training. So this is some advice based on my experience, 30 years in doing this. I've delivered training, I've worked with trainers, I've done investigations, I've been in front of Ministry of Labor, defending organizations. So my advice then is to get a thorough understanding of what competency is. And you, as an employer, can have a supervisor or a mature, experienced employee provide training. What he must be able to do is have a knowledge of the workplace and how the work is done on your particular site. Meaning you wouldn't put a supervisor with 6 months experience on the job in a training role because he typically isn't fully experienced with how things are done. So, you know, a seasoned employee or somebody that's got some a supervisor with some, and I'm going to throw out a number. I'm saying 3 to 4 years, maybe longer, of practical experience in how trailers are loaded, how stock is moved, where stock is placed. That's the person that you're looking for. Secondly, they have to be familiar with the Occupational Health and Safety Act in your province. And in Ontario, that's the Green Book, and they should know their responsibilities under the Act. As an employer, that's your job to make sure they understand their responsibilities. And number 3, they have to be aware of the health and safety hazards at work. And in this particular case, those hazards are simple things like if you've got a 5,000-pound forklift and you're lifting bales of material that are heavier than that, then obviously that's a hazard. And you want somebody that can explain the weight characteristics of the forklift against the task being assigned. You want somebody that can explain that these are areas where pedestrian traffic are restricted. And you know, it's that type of knowledge of your workplace that decides who can deliver the training. The second point I wanted to make is that a rule that I've followed and it's made you know an impression on reducing workplace accidents is that I've used an outside training agency to deliver the generic training, the general training. So they would come in and do the training, and this is an orientation, a general orientation to forklifts, and this is given generally to new people that you've hired to put on a forklift. And then we use a seasoned, experienced employee to deliver the workplace training. So that's how I've done it in the past. I've had a lot of success with it. And if anybody is interested in contacting somebody who can deliver high quality general training, we have somebody in Ontario that can do that, and we'll provide a 10% discount to CWPCA members. The training tools, so what we're providing you once again is a safe work practice. It's written in Word. You can download it from the website and then customize it to your particular facility. I don't recommend you using it directly from the website. I suggest you take a picture, embed it, so that your people understand that it's linked to your particular facility. But in general, that Word document can be used with very little modification. The second is a training presentation. Once again, it's done in PowerPoint. You can insert pictures from your own facility, and it's used as a guide to provide the training on site. And then the third is a record of the training, and I strongly advise everybody to document all training provided to your staff, as well as all refresher training with dates. If there's ever a problem, you as an employer need to substantiate the training that's been provided, and the only way you do that is with good, solid training records documenting when, where, the content of the training, who provided the training. It's absolutely fundamental. Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is the Word document. It's a safe work practice. So in the title there, it's got Canadian Wood Pallet and Container Association, so you would be able to delete that, and you would be able to put in the name of your own company. The rest of it you'd leave as is, and this is a shot, where the cursor is, that's a shot of one of our members, and a shot inside his plant. So the first part of the safe work practice deals with the hazards in operating a forklift. And to just review them, you know, the primary hazard in operating a forklift is a fatality. I've investigated 2 fatalities, both of them crush injuries, but I've also been involved with people driving off docks and rollovers. So the key thing is that I want to get across is the way the regulatory agencies look at this is there's few devices inside a plant that can kill somebody, and a forklift is one of them. So they, in general, pay a lot of attention to forklift operator behavior, how well they're trained, how well they're disciplined, how well the machines are maintained by the employers. So in general, forklift operations get a lot of attention on visits by regulatory agencies. The other types of injuries that occur in the operation of forklifts are unstable loads where pallets fall onto people, where lift trucks, where the operator doesn't really understand properly how to turn coming out of a bay with the forks elevated, so he flips the truck. Unstable loads, slippery floors, for example, he's going over a dock plate and it's icy. He brakes and it skids, twists inside a trailer. The forklift, the other hazards are where the forklifts injure pedestrians inside a plant. Other potential hazards are driving too fast or not looking where they're going. And something that a lot of people forget is that there's a serious exposure to carbon monoxide poisoning from either poorly maintained forklifts, so the engines haven't been maintained properly and they're pumping out higher levels than what are allowed, or the plants, the doors are closed in the wintertime and the carbon monoxides build up, and you can have some very serious accidents or illnesses because of that. So those are the primary hazards, and the way we write these procedures is in alliance with how the ministry would want somebody to prepare a proper document for their facility. And this meets one of your primary responsibilities as an employer, is that you want to make your employees aware of the potential hazards in operating a forklift. So then scrolling down, we're looking at around what we define as competency. So competency for a forklift or lift truck operator is knowledge, and that's knowledge of the regulations, and there's a substantial body of regulations in each of the provincial standards relating to forklifts, and more coming down the pipeline. Understands the hazards associated with his work and the operation of the forklifts, understands the manufacturer's specifications as related to the operation, and safe load requirements for that specific lift truck. And I mentioned that earlier. There's a real need for people to understand what the performance characteristics of the particular forklift is. And then workplace-specific procedures on how the forklift is operated, both in the yard and inside the plant. We define a competent lift truck operator based on his skills. So we talked initially about training and knowledge. Then we step into practical ability to drive the forklift. So we're looking at abilities to do pre-start checks. So you know, the concern there is that you need to be able to prove to, in the case of an accident, be able to prove to the regulatory agencies that that machine was safe prior to being put into operation. The only way you can do that is to substantiate it with a pre-start check. Most manufacturers will supply you with that one. If anybody doesn't have one or can't get one from their supplier, you can contact me. You know, I can supply you a template for building one. But basically, a pre-start check is a review of the operation of the forklift, checking that the tires are in reasonably good shape, and checking fluid levels. And given that these engines and hydraulic systems all depend on adequate fluid levels, low fluid levels will mean poor operation. So that check should be specific to the machine. It shouldn't be pencil whipped. Pencil whipping means just checking it off. You should provide time and training to the operator so he checks the machine and can prove that when he put it into service, it was working properly. Absolutely fundamental. Then you start training your forklift operators on how to start the machine and how to shut it down. General operation, load handling. Now you're getting, you know, very specific characteristics to how you operate forklifts in our particular industry. So some of the particular challenges is the unloading, for example, of return trailers with white pallets in them. They're stacked with, you know, damaged pallets on the bottom that makes the loads unstable, small pallets in the middle, large pallets on top of them. Very, very difficult challenges in unloading white pallets. Not so difficult unloading repaired pallets, but the unloading of trailers is a real challenge in our industry. And then you move on to, you know, stack heights. So there's very specific stack heights for, you know, in the recycling industry for damaged pallets or pallets to be sorted, pallets that need repaired pallets. And in a new pallet manufacturing setting, you also have stack heights and where pallets are going to be set aside and staged ready for being loaded outbound to customers. Also, we use a variety of trailers and delivery mechanisms within our industry. So, for example, forklift operators that are loading dry vans would also need to be trained on how to load flatbeds. And flatbeds present their own unique challenges because our yards typically aren't you know, well graveled or paved. They're a rough yard, and loading or unloading those flatbeds needs some very specific skills in terms of you know, lifting, taking the chains off, have the driver take the chains off, and then pulling those loads off and then staging them where their inventory positions are. And something that should be mentioned is that some of our members are using you know, dual axle straight trucks, and you should never put a forklift on one of those straight trucks. Never, never, never. It's always driver assist because it's simply too much weight for the back end of the straight trucks. And then the last part is the maintenance, the refueling using propane or diesel fuel. So the PPE, personal protective equipment, you'll see in the photo that in this particular facility they have safety headwear, eyewear, and they're also wearing hearing protection. That's not characteristic of all of our plants, but certainly CSA approved footwear and safety glasses are in general something that are used in all of our plants. But you would make this specific to your particular facility. Also, it's a good idea that when you're handling pallets that you provide the drivers with gloves, because often there's a good chance of skin puncture when you're handling pallets, especially recycled pallets. You need to provide, as I've discussed previously, the pre-operation checklist, and you need to make sure that the drivers understand what they're looking for and that they understand the load capacity on those particular machines that they're using. Jumped ahead there. So startup and shutdown, they need to understand how to test to make sure that the forklift is working properly, the brakes are in proper working order, a gear shift, control panels, gauges are all working, side shift is working. These are all fundamental parts to the startup of the machine. It's mandatory that the operators wear their seat belts. That's a requirement in all jurisdictions as far as I understand it. And then they begin operation. And then you reverse the procedure, how to properly shut down the machine. And in my experience, there's been some serious accidents with people not properly shutting the machine down. For example, just applying the parking brake, leaving the engine running, and then finding out that the brake didn't hold and the machine's taken off on you. So shutting down the machine is also a key part of the training that's being done. So these are some general rules under general operation. Okay, so these are done in this way to facilitate rules-based organization of your workplace. So if you need at a later date to develop rules for your forklift operators, these are the primary rules that they have to follow when they're operating the forklift. I won't spend a lot of time on them, but you know, there's some key parts of the training here that you need to be able to get across to your operators, and I'll just pick one that's very important. It's around reducing speed and proceeding with caution when driving on slip, wet, or greasy surfaces. So what we're trying to get at there is that, you know, our driving hazards change with the seasons. So in the summer, things are fine, but you're moving into the wet, wintry weather where it's icy, and the risk profile of operating forklifts, both in the yard and in a warehouse, change considerably. In a warehouse, for example, if you don't have good seals around the doors or no seals at all, the dock plate's wet. As you cross that dock plate, that's where a real potential hazard can occur if you're not managing your speeds properly. So then the next step is we list what you shouldn't be doing, okay? So a driver behavior that is a real challenge in modifying is lowering or raising their forks while the machine is in motion. So for example, he enters into a stack, he pulls the stack back, it's elevated, maybe 20 pallets high, and then he starts to turn. That type of behavior is a setup for a rollover, and the proper behavior that you're trying to get the operator to follow is to pull out of that bay, bring the stack down to ground level, then make the turn. But in my experience, having done this many times, I've seen operators who are geared to driving fast and turning while they're dropping their loads, and it's a recipe for flipping the trailer, or for flipping the forklift. We talk about not carrying any passengers on the forks, sharp turns when traveling fast, talk about rollover behavior. So it's, I remember an accident where I investigated where somebody tried to jump out of the forklift and got a limb out side of the rail, and of course the little limb was badly crushed. So the training that you're delivering to the operators is around keeping inside, keeping your seatbelt on, and keeping inside the perimeter of the cab. We talk about load handling, okay, up and down inclines, how to make sure the load is positioned properly. Good forklift operators will understand this intuitively, but it's a behavior that you want to enforce with training. And then some more information on what they shouldn't be doing. So this, we'll just pick one of those that brings to mind a particular incident that I was involved in, where it says, do not stand between the mast and the load. Now you'd think to yourself, who would ever do something like that? But in this particular case, what happened was the curtain on the door had come down. There was a piece of rope or something, so the operator stopped, put his brake on, left the engine running, and then stepped up with a board to try and jam this piece of rope up so he could get his stack inside the trailer, and inadvertently put his heel on a lever and engaged the tilt mechanism of the mast and pinched him between the mast and the frame of the cab. Luckily, it wasn't too serious, but it sure gave us a heck of a scare. So it's, once again, these are types of behaviors that you want to reinforce not to do while operating your forklift. Then under loading and unloading, once again, this is a challenge in our industry because there's so many potential variations on how loads arrive or loads are shipped out of our facilities. So it's important to remember that we don't control, in many cases, the carriers that are being used either to deliver raw materials or take product out of our facilities. So because of that, as an employer, there's an obligation that you specify to drivers where they can stand or sit, and they have to be kept away from the dock area unless there's work being done on street trucks. So this is absolutely fundamental that you restrict driver access to your loading areas. Keep them away from those busy forklifts. Second part is that the trailers need to be secure. So you know, I'm a strong believer in making sure that if you don't have trailer restraints on your docks, that the wheels are chalked. A lot of people don't do that, but I've found that the process of forcing drivers to chalk wheels, both in the yard and the docks, is a good safety practice because it gets people thinking about making absolutely sure that the trailer or the flatbed is secure. We talk about inspecting the trailers before you go on them, so that's difficult when the trailers are loaded, but you want to make the forklift driver aware of the potential hazards in entering trailers that either have weak spots on the doors or on the floor or weak spots on the walls. And this, once again, can be just a very serious hazard by putting a 5,000-pound forklift on a trailer where the rails underneath the trailer are rotted out, or the bogie wheels are defective or something like that. So orientation towards inspection of the trailers, and then what the driver has to understand exactly what to do if he identifies safety concerns. Can he back out of the trailer and not unload? Who does he go to? Who does he tell if the trailer is unsafe? That's the key thing. Instructing the driver to say, yes, it's okay not to unload that trailer if you feel that you're going to, you know, tip the trailer over. So This also includes dock plate operation, manual controls on the dock plates, manual overrides, and who straps and unstraps flatbed loads in the yard. Talk once again about what you shouldn't be doing while loading or unloading. We talk about operational maintenance. So in my experience, anytime there's a serious critical injury or any type of accident with a forklift, the Ministry of Labor will ask for two things immediately. And that's one is I want records of training that's been done for this particular worker that's been injured. And second, I want to see the maintenance records for that machine. If you're unable to provide either training records or the maintenance records, then of course the potential for an order to be issued or it becoming much more serious is heightened. So the emphasis here is to maintain a daily logbook of the or a file detailing all of the pre-start reports and a file that maintains a record of all prescribed maintenance, which is your scheduled maintenance that the manufacturer has set up. It could be every 160 hours or 200 hours is the kind of the two benchmarks, and any emergency maintenance. So when you call him in for work identified that needs to be done, you want immediate access in a file with all of those maintenance records by machine, and that's the best practice that I would encourage. The logbooks should be kept for the life of the truck, so until the truck is turned back as a rental or dealt off if you own it, then all of those records should be maintained on site. Another best practice is that some people use their maintenance people, their maintenance mechanics on site to do some of the maintenance of the forklifts. It's not something I would recommend, because if there's ever a problem with that machine, the ministry is going to call in to question the maintenance qualifications of the person maintaining it. And you want to make sure that the person doing the maintaining is qualified to do that. Sometimes it's a little bit extra money, but my recommendation is to use the maintenance mechanic that's got some kind of qualifications behind them. If you want to know what those qualifications are, you can give me a call and I'll explain them, because they vary a little bit by province. And then the last part is that on your regular scheduled maintenance, you should have your forklift mechanic measure the CO levels. In the summertime, this is less of a concern, but nevertheless, you should be making sure that the machines are tuned up, not pumping high concentrations of carbon monoxide into the workplace. In the winter, it's good practice to make sure doors are cracked at all times, and of course you definitely want to make sure that machines aren't pumping high levels of CO into the facility, otherwise you're going to poison your workforce. The last is around refueling. Some people feel that you should have a separate procedure for refueling. In my experience, it's part and parcel of the training of a forklift operator. So that's why I've included it here. So the refueling, some key things to remember is sources of ignition. So and sources of ignition just isn't smoking. It's grinding, cutting of metal, any welding that's going on. You have to make sure that your designated area for refueling the trucks are at least 10 meters or 25 feet from any potential source of ignition. And then make sure that they understand how to switch out the propane cylinders. The cylinders should, of course, be in a locked cage with access control with a lock and from your propane supplier. Talks about handling, so once again, this is a particular hazard. If you've ever got a burn off that propane, it can be a nasty injury. So good idea is to wear gloves when you're handling the propane cylinders. To make sure that the relief valve is placed properly. That's a critical factor in the training, that the straps holding down the cylinders are properly engaged. And the key point that you want to remember, if they're not engaged, you risk damaging the fittings. And you want to make sure that any hose lines are kept free of any sharp edges so they don't injure themselves. And then, of course, on the refueling of the diesel tanks, they're outside, and you want to make sure that there's no spilling or overflowing when you're doing that refilling. So that's the safe work practice, and that if that training is provided to your forklift operators, you're going to have a good standard in front of you to make sure that you have a safe workplace. Now the training, actual training, how is that done? So this is how I've done the training in the past, and I use PowerPoints as a guide. Okay, I'm not saying that everybody has to use a PowerPoint, but what I've found is that in training the folks that work in our workplaces, they like visual representation. They like a picture in front of them in addition to words, and it helps focus their attention. So that's what I do, and you can customize this to your facility. Okay, so the way you start off with this, and this would be typically a supervisor or a senior lead hand or yourself doing the training. You start off with your objectives, and how are we doing for time there, Stephanie? Okay, so you start off with your general training objectives, and in this case, the objectives are to provide general and workplace-specific training, how to properly inspect and maintain the forklifts used in the site, familiarize the operators with the plant layout and how to operate a forklift safely inside the plant, identify specific workplace hazards, and how to ensure the third slide where it talks about general forklift training, these are the fundamentals that would be provided by in a classroom setting by a certified forklift trainer. So, you know, in the past I've used a company called SafeTech in Ontario. We've used I've used all kinds of people across Canada, but these are general points that are discussed in all orientation training for either a new hire or somebody that you're promoting off the floor from a repair operator to a forklift driver. And so just to go down those quickly, it's a review of what the provincial legislation and guidelines are, the responsibilities under the Occupational Health and Safety Act for forklift operators, awareness of general hazards, the causes of forklifts, you know, behaviors and conditions within the workplace, the standards around right-of-way, defensive driving, basic and confined space maneuvering, which is always a challenge in our business because we often don't have control either over inventory levels. For example, in the recycling business, after Christmas is typically when a lot of white pallets flow back, and then again in after the seasonal garden centers, a lot of these white pallets come back, and they got to go somewhere. And of course, what happens is there's a lot of congestion inside the facility. So how do you train your operators to operate, you know, when when stock levels are low, and as well as training them when stock levels are high and they encroach on your drive aisles. How do the operators get orientation to the training then? So that's what basic and confined space is talking about. And then working at heights, that's moving the stacks, stacking, pulling down stacks of pallets. That's what that's all about. Load stability, forklift stability, and then additionally they talk about dock safety, trailer inspection, traveling on grades. You can see it there. And the training is generally geared to new operators and then existing operators for refresher training. So depending on who's getting trained in your workplace, there's they tailor the training to those two fellas or those two groups of employees. The thing I should mention is there's some new laws, or there's some new the CSA sets some new standards around forklifts, and they are generally followed by the provincial regulatory authorities. So what you're going to be seeing is the new CSA standards have just been upgraded, and now they're working their way into the various provinces, and you're going to see some changes around how they look at training and who is going to be trained. And what they're recommending is all forklift operators get recertified every 3 years, and that the refresher course is given every 18 months. Now that's not the law now, but that's the recommendation. My sense is that within 2 to 3 years that'll be the standard that'll be adopted across Canada. So workplace specific training is quite a bit different than from the generic training. So workplace specific training is taking the operator out of the classroom, that formal setting, and taking them on the floor. So what I'm talking about here is a checklist of what you should be talking to your forklift operator about in your specific, and this needs to be customized. The substance abuse policy should be reviewed. Unfortunately, in my experience, there's been numerous problems with substance abuse over my experience. So this is a time where you lay it very clearly to the operator what your expectations are, which is no alcohol, no drugs, zero tolerance, and what happens if any operator is caught with under the influence or with alcohol in his breath. What are the repercussions? And that should be well documented. And then of course there's medical restrictions. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you're taking drugs for pain relief, then you shouldn't be operating a forklift. Okay. If you need more information about this, or you'd like to talk a little more specifically about it, this is an area that we can talk offline and provide additional resources. Next step is you go over your PPE. So as you can see in the picture, this recycling plant, high-vis vests, safety glasses to prevent the dust coming off these pallets from getting into the eyes and causing pink eye, hearing protection, and hard hats. So that may not be typical in all of the facilities for the people attending this call, but in this particular location, this is what the employer is prescribing for his employees. We talk about the pre-shift inspection. So this is where you introduce your own customized pre-start report, and you demonstrate to the employee how to check the fluid levels and where to check them on those particular pieces of equipment that are in use in your plant. We talk about startup and shutdown. We move on to loading and unloading. Okay, so this is where you're familiarizing the operator to really the tasks at hand inside the facility. So if you want them to load and unload dry vans, 53s and 48s, then this is where you're providing that training to him. If you're a recycling operation, it's how to pull the pallets off the trailers, how to create stable loads, what to do if the loads are unstable. It's that type of training that you're providing, and this is practical training with somebody who's experienced in doing the work. If you're in the yard and you've got to unload flatbeds, then where do you do this? So I mean, that's one of the key things, is that often that yard operator is telling the driver where he wants him to park, so he has a nice flat surface to work from. He's instructing the driver to pull the chains off or pull any tarps if need be. He's making sure that the driver perhaps has a high-vis vest if he's working in the yard. It's that type of training that you're providing at this part of the training program. And then you talk about the restrictions. So if there's straight trucks coming in your facility, you make it clear to them that there's no forklifts whatsoever allowed on straight trucks, and it's mandatory driver assist, and there's a specific procedure for how that's done so that that driver that's using the hand truck doesn't get hurt. And you talk about refueling, okay, where it's done, how it's done properly. You handle the plant layout, okay, so it's a good idea that you orient the forklift operators to where your storage areas are, where the work areas are, the dock, and where the drive aisles are, where you expect them to be stopping, okay, where you expect pedestrian activity. So for example, a good best practice is that there are certain areas where there's always lots of pedestrian activity, toilets, lunchroom, shipping office. And these are areas where you want to make your forklift operators aware that you want to slow down, watch carefully, avoid those areas, because the risk of either hitting a pedestrian or potentially dropping a load and it striking a pedestrian are higher. So it's that type of discussion that you're having with your forklift operators. My experience in dealing with forklift operators is, unless they're trained properly, moving either bales along or finished goods or pallets to be inspected and repaired way too many times. So, my instruction to them is you pick it up once and you put it away properly, and I don't want to see you dropping these in, some convenient place and going back to get it. Do it once and do it properly. So this is where you're getting that discussion with the operator, where he understands where stock is to be placed inside the yard. I've used a map in the past to instruct this to them. It's good best practice. You talk about where there should be no pedestrian activity whatsoever, and areas to restrict pedestrian activity generally are the dock areas and anywhere in the yard where you don't want pedestrians walking around, either unescorted or with for any reason other than perhaps a weekly stock taking. Then you move on to dock operations. So if you have dock levelers on site, and this is where you talk about that. If you're using portable dock levelers, then you talk about how that's being done. Dock hazards, in my experience, I probably investigated a dozen situations where forklifts will come off the docks, either because trailers are pulled out when they shouldn't have. Inclement weather, there are a variety of potential hazards, but in Canada, with dock level receiving in many of our customers' facilities, this is a high hazard area. In the yards, it's different. In the yards, the high hazard is flipping the trailer because of unstable loading platform, or icy weather that changes the characteristics in the yard. So this is where you get those discussions going. Once again, I'm an advocate of wheel chocks because it forces a discipline into people. I know that people argue that it's a waste of time. In my experience, it's never been a waste of time. I've seen it prevent trailers from pulling away from loading platforms on numerous occasions, and it gets a safety culture with the forklift drivers and the truck drivers going. Trailer inspection is where you talk about trailer decks and what to do if you see deterioration on the deck or deterioration underneath the around the dolly wheels, and instruct the driver what to do in that case. We talk about truck driver safety. Good best practice now is that all the drivers wear high-vis vests in the yard, or whether they're coming out of their cab and going to the shipping office. Working at heights is around pallet stack heights and lumber stacking. I remember one of our members, in my early days, where he tried to lift 2 bales of lumber in a pallet manufacturing center, and one of the bales tipped and crushed one of his employees. And unfortunately, in this particular case, and I believe the guy's still a member, he fiddled with the accident investigation situation, which really caused him a lot of challenge. So at this juncture, what you're talking about is what are the the proper stack heights for both pallets and repair pallets, as well as your bales of lumber, okay, and your weight restrictions on your machines. You're talking about where you expect stock to be put away, and how you enforce that. The next area is particularly a challenge because in our business we have forklifts servicing both the conveyors, or in some cases putting stacks and pulling stacks away from repair areas. So there's a high potential to strike a pedestrian, a worker at the workstation, if you don't have visual recognition between the two of them. And since the forklift drivers are generally moving quickly, there needs to be specific training on how to enter and exit work areas, how to catch the visibility of the operator, okay, and also how to handle the waste dumpers if you have them on site. Incident reporting. So my good best practice in any facility is to enforce mandatory incident reporting. So if the if you get one forklift collide with another, and both operators feel that it's okay not to report it, that's in my book, that's grounds for discipline, because you'll never get to the bottom of why your machines are getting damaged, or whether you have damage to the plant, unless you enforce procedures or policy with your drivers to report all incidents of collisions, especially anything that involves a collision with a pedestrian. Talk about maintenance, what to do with malfunctioning trucks, and the workers definitely want to hear from employers to say, look, if it's not working properly, I don't want you to drive it. And if it's not working properly, I want the repairs done to it by somebody who knows what they're doing. So this is where you review that. And then the no smoking rule on refueling, which we've already talked about. Then in terms of pedestrian, so once again, this might be something you've not seen in the past, where you're linking pedestrian safety and forklift operation, but I've found this is a good way to deliver training, because this is where the ministry is looking, okay, and they're being very, very tough around pedestrian segregation these days. And I know a number of our members have been told specifically, they've been issued with work orders around pedestrian segregation from forklift activity. So, it's a good best practice to have in your training specific references to how to prevent injury to pedestrians. So that talks about restricting pedestrians from certain areas where forklifts are operating. And so the primary area is there should be nobody walking around in the yard unless it's your annual stock taking, and there should be nobody in your dock areas whatsoever. And those should be published and marked out. It's a good idea to create separate like drive aisles for your forklifts and walk zones for your forklift or for your pedestrians as they move from work area to the lunchroom, work area to the washroom. It talks about how to make eye contact, make sure areas are well lit, okay, and that your visibility is not restricted. Talks about blind corners, okay, wearing high-vis vests inside your facilities, where to limit forklift speeds, the need not to walk under forks when they're being raised, and about awareness. And then talks about some other guidelines, rules about preventing pedestrian accidents, obviously not allowing anybody to ride on a forklift, about the risks in stopping suddenly. So there's been some nasty accidents, and one in 2012 with a pallet company where they stopped suddenly and a stack of pallets fell, and of course they cascaded out and struck an employee and injured him quite seriously, and the fine was about $50,000. So you know, this is where you talk about those type of driver behaviors and how to prevent those type of injuries. And then that's it. The last part of any training is a competency assessment. So this is, in my experience, something that's not done on a regular basis. Okay, the training is delivered, and then the trainer walks away from it. My recommendation is to never do that. Always provide some level of competency assessment, and don't be afraid to identify a pass or a fail, and then spend the time to re-instruct the worker on the right way to do things. So I've listed a simple competency assessment. You can add to this or take away from it, but it gets across 3 or 4 fundamental points. Number one, you've got to have a review with the person being trained to see if he absorbed, if he understood what you were talking about, because you're providing a lot of information and some of it might get missed. This is an opportunity for re-instruction. Number two, this is your chance to say, look, he can cut it or he can't cut it. And my experience is some people have been reluctant to say he just isn't going to make a good forklift operator. You better make sure that as an employer, whoever's making that decision feels comfortable with saying, no, we're not going to put him on the truck because I just don't think he can do the job. And then the last part of it is to say, look, we've assessed him, he's passed it, and we think he's done a good job. Some companies provide a certificate, okay, or they get a license or something that says, yes, you passed the training. That's a good best practice. But what's more important is that you have a review of his ability prior to putting him into a probationary driving setting. The last part is that you document all your training. Okay, so here's a very simple training record, but it talks about the company, the course, who provided the training, the date, the length of time, who attended, nature. Absolutely fundamental. If there's a problem, this has to be pulled out and provided to the Ministry of Labor. And typically I would attach the PowerPoint and the safe work practice to the back of the training records and keep it in a bind. What that demonstrates to any regulatory agency is that you're, as an employer, you're serious about training and that you have provided the training as required by law. That's the session. We're just about finished for there's any questions, fire away. Okay, well, we don't have any questions, so what we're going to do is post this to the website. You'll be able to review it at your leisure. Thank you for attending, and keep your workers safe.